Hello! So today we are doing a beginner's guide of sorts to starting the Fenix Airbus A321 in Microsoft Flight Simulator and using the integration with Simbrief to program the aircraft up and then get it into the air. So we'll try to cut corners where we can and do a functional start procedure for the aircraft that doesn't take into account all of the tests that a real crew might do, but does the most pragmatic things that the simulator will support, and will presume that things are not going to go wrong with the aeroplane, and will presume the starting configuration of the aeroplane from its default cold and dark state. And the whole idea of this is to make your life easier, really. So we're going to use the Simbrief integration, so we're going to go and use Simbrief to generate a flight plan for us. So let's do that first. If we go over to the Simbrief website, you need a log-on for Simbrief. It's a free Navigraph account is what you need. If you've got a paid Navigraph account, there are advantages to that in terms of the date of the AirAC data you'll be using, but you can do it for free. Okay, so if we go into the dispatch system once we're logged into Simbrief, we can then click on the link, and it pops open this window where we can generate flights, and we can create a new flight. So within this box, or within this form, we can fill in the airline code, and we can make one up. We don't have to use a real airline. So we can put VFA for Virtual Flight Airline, for example, and then we can put a flight number, so flight number 123. And then we put in the codes for the airport we're leaving and going to. So if you don't know the codes, you can look them up. So I'm going to click on the departure magnifying glass, and if we go and have a look on our route here on our map, we are down in Orlando. So if we type in Orlando, and we can see there it is, Kilo Mike Charlie Oscar would be the ICAO code for Orlando. So we'll select that, and let's put that in there for us. Then we can choose where we're going. So where do we want to go today? Should we go to San Francisco International maybe? So KSFO. So I can either search for the code look, or I could type in San Fran, and it will list them with the best match at the top look is KSFO, and I can select it. So that's populated that as well. The only thing we are left to do now is actually choose the aeroplane type, and then Simbrief will work everything out for us. So we go and look down the list, and we choose, we're in the A321 Neo. So we'll choose that from the list. It's the A21N, which is the A321 251N, and N is for Neo. Neo means new engine option, if you've ever wondered. So then we'll select that, and now it knows enough. So it will look at the current weather, and it's figured out the route from Orlando over to San Francisco. Now we're not going to fly the whole route today. I'll take it as far as taking off just to show you it. But we're going to go and work through all of the steps to get onto the runway and get into the air. Okay, so that's given us a preview of the route, and it will show you it down here, the actual route information. So you've got, for example, there's the standard instrument departure, and then you've got a sequence of waypoints and airways as it flies across the US, and then you've got a standard terminal arrival route, or STAR, leading in towards San Francisco. So we can just click generate flight now, and it's going to generate us an operational flight plan, or OFP. So this is essentially the folder of paperwork that the crew take onto the aeroplane when you see them preparing for a flight when you're at the airport. So if you've ever looked out of the departure lounge window and seen the crew with a folder on the dashboard of the aeroplane and programming in the various things and talking to each other, that's what they were dealing with. So we've generated it, and the computer is now showing us a summary of the information from it. For example, with our cruise altitude, the cruise profile or cost index to set the engines up, and then various other bits and pieces, like all of your load sheet is done there, and there's the actual route that's been programmed across the country. You can view it in its original form, which is very similar than the real crews have, if we just click View PDF. So in View PDF we get to see the paper version. So in here it's fairly straightforward once you find your way around it. So you've got where you're going from and to at the top, and the names of the airports. You've got the cost index over there. You've got the fuel plan here, which again, we don't really have to pay too much attention to this because we're going to use the integration. But if you did want to go and fill this all in by hand, you could. So there's your block fuel. The total of all the fuel for the trip, the contingency, going to an alternate airport if we can't get to San Francisco. You've got the, what's it called? Final reserves fuel. You've got then you've got the total for takeoff. Then you've got taxi fuel. It's interesting, isn't it? So you can see how it adds it all up together to come up with the final numbers. And then further down, you've got the routing. So there's our route through the airspaces. So you can see there we've got the SID, and you've got waypoints, and direct to another waypoint. Then you've got an airway and a waypoint, and so on and so forth. And it eventually ends up doing the Diamond 5-star into San Francisco. Notice it doesn't have an approach, so that's something we will have to solve. But anyway, we have generated an operational flight plan in Simbrief. So let's go and jump over. So lots of people use LittleNavMap, so we'll do this both in LittleNavMap and in Navigraph to see what we've been given by Simbrief and what else we need to do. So if we go to the File menu in LittleNavMap, we can open a flight plan from Simbrief. If we do that, we have to put our username in the box there, but then we can download a flight plan, and it will show us the most recent one we made in Simbrief. Then we can create the flight plan from that brief, basically. So click on that, and there we go. We've got our flight plan. The same one that appeared in Simbrief is now appearing in LittleNavMap. And you can go down and you can see there's the star and there's the approach into San Francisco. So if we went and looked at San Francisco, you'll see, does it actually tell us which approach that is? It doesn't, does it? So it's doing 28 right. It's probably just using the ILS approach, to be honest, but this is where one of the falling down points really of LittleNavMap that is not telling us that. So what you could do is right click on the airport, show the procedures for San Francisco. So we're coming into 28 right. So if we scroll down, we can look at the approaches. So there's an ILS for 28 right. Okay, and you can see there's several transitions there. So we could actually, is there one for Frelly? No, there isn't. But we can superimpose them. If we click on each one, we can see where it goes. So that's probably a better one than we were on. If we went to Dunbar instead of, because look, it basically had no approach built in. So Archie would be there, Dunbar is there, Eddie is the other direction, and Sidby is opposite. So Archie would be really good for us. So let's right click on that and insert that. So we need to remember that. We can do exactly the same thing in Navigraph though. Okay, so that's completed our route. If we go over to Navigraph charts and we do a import flight and we import from Simbrief, you see obviously same as LittleNavMap almost. The most recent one we created in Simbrief is at the top. So if we click on the arrow on that, it will load it in and you will see, yeah, we've got the departure, we've got the SID there, we've got the destination airport, we've got the destination runway and the star. We just haven't got an approach selected. So if you remember when we did this in LittleNavMap, we chose ILS for runway 28 right. So let's go and open that up. So ILS 28 right is right at the top of the list. It's the most favoured option. Okay, so if we add that to our route, you can see it's gone and done it. And it's gone the same route that we said, the same transition. Look, it's gone Archie, Ziled, Ger, Dunbar, and straight in. So the important thing for us then is there's no dotted bits in the route, so there won't be a discontinuity. If you get dotted items in the route, so if you look along it, there's no dotted items in Navigraph, meaning there's no gaps where the airplane might not know what to do next. Except there is actually, look, right on the departure from Orlando. So if we go and pull open the... So it's doing an RNAV departure, that's why, look. the standard instrument departure is RNAV. So there's a gap there where we're under our own navigation. Now, we may fly direct from Vilnius to Red Sox, but let's go and have a look and see how that looks in LittleNavMap, just to contrast the two views of it. So if we come down here, LittleNavMap's actually got some routing there for it. Look, it's done Diamond 5 Inyo. Oh, that's the star, sorry. We got Red Sox 1 and Jeffries. So did Navigraph have something different? Red Sox 1 and Jeffries, but it hasn't drawn it. Now, why is that? So let's go and have a read and see what this says. We've got direct to fix, course to fix, look. Manual termination. So what that really means is, so it's just rendered it slightly differently. So it'll be interesting to see how the aeroplane differs. I just thought this is really interesting to show you things you'll have to solve on the aeroplane. You're not always going to get a perfect SID or star or route, you know, that all sticks together and works. So you need to keep these things in mind. Okay, anyway, we've done enough looking at route planning. Let's go and jump in the aeroplane and use that integration to help us populate the aeroplane with everything we're going to need. So we go and jump inside the aeroplane. And the first thing we're going to do is press Control and 5 to go overhead. And we're going to press the battery buttons in the middle. 1 and then 2, and the aeroplane will come online. And then we have external power available, so we'll go and turn the external power on. Okay, then we're going to go immediately and turn the strobes to auto. We're going to put the nav and logo lights to setting number 1. And we're going to go and turn the master switch for the APU on. And then give it a few seconds, and then we're going to press the start button for the APU. So that's the auxiliary power unit that will provide the aircraft's own internal source of power and compressed air to spin up the engines. So obviously once the APU is up and running, we can turn off the external power, but for the moment we have both. So the next thing we do after that is go and arm the emergency lights. The beeping you're hearing is the avionics systems powering up around the aircraft, so don't worry about that. So then we go and set up the inertial reference system. So we turn all 3 units up here to nav, so they'll be busy calibrating and aligning themselves. And then if we roll the knob above them to STS and set to system 1, it'll tell you how many minutes until they align. So we've got 7 minutes. So obviously we're talking as we go, and we'll be looking at programming the MCDU on the way, the flight management computer. So we'll be busy. We'll go and turn the crew air supply on while we're here, and then we'll carry on with our checklist. So next thing is to go and look at the MCDU and the tablet. So go over to the tablet first, so press Control and 3 to get here. And we are going to program our flight using Simbrief, which will shortcut the process for us enormously. So the first thing we do is go to the Fenix app, and we just tap to import from Simbrief. This does mean you have to have configured in here your Simbrief ID, which you can do in the settings on the app. But if we come back into Fenix again, first thing we do then, oh sorry, I've gone to the wrong page. Go to My Flights, sorry, at the top, at the bottom left. Then click on Tap to Import from Simbrief, and it will get the latest flight. So there's the flight we just set. We got 19 minutes to go until departure. So we better get our skates on. So what do we do once we've loaded our flight in? We're going to go to the Mass and Balance section. So this will be pre-populated now with the numbers from Simbrief. So we've got planned 220 passengers and boarded so far 176. We've got the planned cargo 5488, none is on board yet. Fuel 15811 is needed according to the plan. We've got 2999 in the tanks, so we need to load the aircraft. Yeah, so we'll click load, and it gives us the option. We can either do it in real time, which would take 26 minutes, and that'll be too slow for us. But we can just do it instantly. Okay, so that's happened immediately. We can then, and here comes the first trick, we can then send that data straight to the MCDU, which is the flight management computer. So instead of us keying this stuff in on the performance and initialization pages, it's just going to populate it immediately. So we'll send it to the MCDU and it's done it. Okay. The next thing we need to do is go over to the departure and performance app. So if we go and click on that one, it thinks we're leaving KMCO on 17 right. Let's just compare that against our route here. So it's picked up the data from Simbrief as well on the performance calculator for takeoff. So all we need to do is click sync load sheet, which will make sure that the takeoff weight and percentages are correct according to what was on our load sheet. Then we sync the weather to make sure it's up to date. Then we click calculate. And the top right corner of the screen now will show the V speeds, the flap position, so flap 2, remember that, flex temp if we have one. So it's all been calculated for us. And again, we can send it straight to the MCDU. So we don't have to program any of this in. So we'll send it and it's sent, okay? So the next thing we do is go and visit the MCDU itself. So we press Control 1. Now we need to visit the FMGC section. So we go into there, and initially it shows us the dates of our nav database. So that's all fine, and we can press Init. So notice it hasn't programmed anything about routing in yet. We go and press the Init request button, and it will pull from Simbrief automatically. So I'll press it. The star goes away. Just wait for a moment. And it comes up and it tells us that we're going from KMCO to KSFO. It doesn't pull down the flight number, the cost index, or the flight level. So you do need to know where to go and look those up, and I'll show you. And it gives you the message here, look, the flight plan uplink has happened. So we can clear that message. We need to go and find these things out. So we know we just made up a flight number of 123. So where is the cost index? Let's go and have a look at that operational flight plan. So cost index is at the top right of the flight plan. CI is 5. So we come in here and we put 5 in the scratch pad and drop it into cost index. Next we want the cruise flight level. So we are going to be flying, if you remember, actually I'll show you this on here. We've got initial altitude is 36,000 feet. You need to divide that by 100. You can type 36,000 in and it will understand, but it will also understand a flight level is in hundreds of feet. So 360 times 100 is 36,000, so flight level 360. The reason flight levels are used is any altitude below the transition altitude, and I'm not going to get into that today, but any altitude below that is named in thousands of feet. Any altitude, so in America that's 18,000 feet, by the way. It's consistent across the whole of America. Any altitude above 18,000 feet is named as a flight level. So 360. So we drop that in, and it's giving us a warning there. We can disregard that warning for today's purposes because we don't want to really get into all of this. Then the next thing we need to do is go and look in wind. So we go and click on wind. And we can do a wind request and it will fetch the data for us. So we just click on the request and wait, and then it will populate with information. So it says wind data uplink has happened. We can clear that message and we can go next phase. So that's the climb wind. There's the descent wind. So all this basically means is the different winds at different headings, speeds and altitudes. And we can go back again and look at the climb wind again, and we could request it again if we wanted to. We don't need to. So let's come back out of there. So we're hearing some beeping going on. That's probably the accuracy of the system has improved. So the other thing the Simbrief integration won't have given us is the SID, the star, or the approach. All it's given us is the routing information. If we go and look in flight plan, we've got KMCO, then we've got a discontinuity, then we've got Jeffries, excuse me. And if we scroll through, we'll see the same at the other end. So this is all of our routing through the airspace. So that's what Simbrief has given us. Then we've got a discontinuity and then San Francisco. So it's not dictating how to depart from Orlando or how to approach San Francisco. So let's go fix that. If I go and click on flight plan, all I need to do is go and click on our departure airport, click on departure, and we can choose how we are leaving. So let's go and look at our flight plan again. So in Simbrief, if we go and look at the route, we want that first part. So there's KMCO, runway 17 right, and then the Red Sox 01 standard instrument departure. Okay. If you can't interpret that yourself or you have trouble, if you have got Navigraph, it will help you. So I'll just get rid of that diagram. So you can see here 17 right and Red Sox 01 with the Jeffries transition. Okay, so back in the aeroplane, 17 right, then we can't see Red Sox, so we scroll, Red Sox 1, and there's the Jeffries transition, and insert it into our flight plan. So we're leaving the airport now on 17 right, and there's a few waypoints there with some restrictions, or sorry, constraints on them, of we must be above 1,500 feet at that point, for example. And then there's a gap into the rest of the plan. So if we just scroll this up a bit, we can just get rid of that discontinuity. We looked at this earlier, if you remember. Oh look, with GPS has just switched over. It does sometimes come up with messages while you're trying to type things. So clear the discontinuity. Oh, it won't. And the reason for that is manual. This is really good that this has happened. Because when we leave Vilnius, it's our own navigation until we get to Red Sox. So in the real world, you'd be given vectors by air traffic control, but we obviously are not going to be using air traffic control. So if we get rid of the manual step, we can then get rid of the discontinuity as well. Okay, and we can insert that. That's not 100%, you know, it's not accurate to the real world. That's not how they would do it, but for our simulation purposes and making it simple, that's what we can do. Okay. When you're looking at the flight plan page, no matter where you are on it, the destination will always be at the bottom line. So if we go and click on KSFO, we need to then describe how we're going to arrive at KSFO or San Francisco. So remember we said it's Diamond 5 into 28 right. Let's go and have a look at Navigraph just to confirm that. So Diamond 5 into 28 right, but it's using that Archie transition. So if you remember when we looked at the different routes, that was the one that connected up nicely. Oh, it's also using, just having a look at that, Diamond 5 with the Inyo transition on the star, and then the approach is 28 right with the Archie transition. So Diamond 5 with Inyo, 28 right with Archie. So remember those bits and pieces. So ILS 28 right, and then Inyo, wasn't it? Oh, sorry, let's have a look under the... No, Diamond 5, sorry. Diamond 5, I'll get it right eventually. There's Inyo. And we can insert that into the route. Yeah? So that's gone and put all of that straight into our route, and if we scroll through now, we should find that we shouldn't have any discontinuities because we deliberately chose, yeah, there isn't any, look. So anything after KSFO is your missed approach, so we don't need to pay too much attention to that in today's video. Okay, if you want to do what's called a gross check of that, all you need to do is come back up into the cockpit, and you can see now we know that the inertial reference system has now configured and aligned itself because we can see the attitude indicator and we can see the flight plan on here. Yeah, if that wasn't true, we still wouldn't see anything on the navigation display or the primary flight display. So, how do we do a gross check of the flight plan? We rotate this knob up here with the various modes for the navigation display. Let's get rid of that caution as well. We rotate this knob to plan, and it puts the aeroplane in the middle of the navigation display. Let me just get the view so you can see both. And then on here, it's going to show you the second line. So it's showing this intercept waypoint on the second line. If we now scroll the legs upwards, so move the contents of the screen upwards, the aeroplane will move along the route. So before we do that, let's increase the range so you can see it a bit more easily. So that's 80 miles range. So if you keep an eye on this, we're just going to press the up arrow repeatedly on the MCDU. This only works when you're in plan mode, by the way. So if we press up, 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 you can see the navigation display is moving along the route. We just keep going, and we're looking for anything that doesn't look as we would expect, basically. Because sometimes you can get, you know, waypoints or duplicate waypoints, and you pick the wrong one, maybe. So you've got the run-in now, look towards KSFO, there we go. And there's that Archie that we talked about earlier. So if we zoom in, you can actually see that. Look, there's Archie and Kepin on all the way into San Francisco, 28 right. Okay, so we've confirmed, we've done our gross check of the flight plan, and it looks correct. Just to confirm what we talked about earlier, normally if you were programming everything by hand, you'd have to come into init and fill in lots of data. We still have to do a small amount ourselves. So we go to the init page, and you can see the arrows are at the top right, meaning we can go sideways. We need to put in how much fuel we've got. So all we need to do is select fuel planning, and again, Simbrief strikes again. Notice the numbers for zero fuel weight have already been filled in for us. That was the integration doing its work. So fuel planning, we go and select it, wait, and it comes up, and then select block confirm. Okay, and that's done the fuel prediction for the route now. If you go and look at the performance page, you can see there's all of our V-speeds have been calculated, our flaps have already been calculated, and we can go to next phase. We can see there's our climb parameters. We can go into next phase. You can see there's our cruise parameters. We can go to next phase, and there's the descent parameters, and so on and so forth. But approach doesn't have anything in. You will do this while you're en route. So you'll put in the QNH of the destination airfield when you're closer to it, and the temperature, and any baro settings if you want to put in your limits. But it should be good. I'll cover all of that in a video one day, all about, you know, doing approaches and what you need to be mindful of. Okay, so we've got the route in, and all of the performance data is in the MCDU, and we used the integration to shortcut a lot of that, so we didn't have to go back and forth picking up numbers and filling them in. It's worth pointing out the procedure document I've written up does have it detailed for you to do it by hand as well, so if you want to do that, you can. Right, next thing, press Control and 7, and we come over to the Mode Control Panel, or MCP. So we need, actually I'm going to do this from one side, it's easier to show you and illustrate something from one side. These knobs can be pushed or pulled. So the one over here sets our target altitude for our climb. If we go and have a look at our summary over here, the flight plan takes us up to 36,000 feet. So we'll go and roll this to get to 36,000. Now in the real world, you wouldn't go straight for this. You'd be cleared to a particular altitude by your first controller, and then you might be cleared up to cruise altitude later. But notice there's a dot next to it. That's the same as pushing these knobs in. Yeah, so that means if you push the knob towards the airplane, you're effectively saying the airplane is going to decide how to get to 36,000 feet, and it's going to do that by following the flight plan restrictions. So you can see here, as we depart, it's saying 140 knots off the runway, then 180 at the intercept point, then 200 at Vilnius, then 250 up until we get to 10,000 feet, because obviously below 10,000 feet we're not allowed to go faster than 250. So basically, for speed, heading and altitude, if you push them all in, so if you click the top half of the buttons, it means managed mode. If you can't select managed mode, that means your flight plan is not complete. Okay? Or the performance data is not complete. But if you get the dots come up, that means, and it is the default in the Airbus, then you've got managed mode. If you click the bottom half of the buttons, you're taking over control. So if I click the bottom half, I pull the speed, and I'm setting the speed for the auto throttle. If I push it, I'm letting the aeroplane decide. Same with the heading. If I pull the bottom half, I get to set the heading, and you'll see that spin round. You can see the marker moving there on the navigation display. If I press it towards the aircraft, that disappears, and the aeroplane's going to do it itself. Yeah, same for altitude. So it's going to get to that altitude under its own steam, following the performance and restriction rules in the flight management computer. So that's all we needed to do in here, really, was make sure we're in the correct modes and set the target altitude. And again, you just push it in to make it set it. And that will appear then at the top of the altitude ribbon on the primary flight display. Okay, the next thing we need to do is go and set the QNH. So we need to set obviously altitude is measured by air pressure, and you can roll the knob up here to change it, to set the current air pressure at the runway you're at, or the airport you're at. You can press B to shortcut that, and it will set it to the accurate number for you. So it's obviously 1018 hectopascals where we are. You can switch between inches and hectopascals up here. So you've got inches in Mercury, and then you've got hectopascals. In the US, I think they tend to use inches. In Europe, we tend to use hectopascals, which is the same as millibars, basically. Okay, so it's what's the word? Imperial versus metric, basically. Okay, so we go, and if we had a physical standby, or sorry, backup attitude indicator, then you would uncage it, but we don't have one in this aircraft, so we don't need to. It's one of the options when you can either, it might be built into your livery that the particular carrier you have chosen has got a different set of instruments on the cockpit, so they might have a physical backup attitude indicator instead of a digital one. Obviously with the digital one you don't have to uncage it, it is how it is. Okay, so next thing we're going to deal with is any company messages. So we press Control 1 to come down to the MCDU. We press the MCDU menu. The reason we're dealing with this, by the way, if we go and have a look over on the ECAM screen, you can see the parking brake is on, TCAS is on standby, we have company messages. So we'd like that to go away. So we look down at the MCDU, we go to the MCDU menu button, which brings us to this page. Then we go to ATSU, then we go to AOC, and then you can see received messages. From this page you can also fetch weather reports, by the way. That's probably your most useful thing in here, apart from what we're about to do. So you go to received messages, and you can see 2 load sheets have been broadcast to the aircraft. So this is the ground sending what they understand to have gone onto the aeroplane. So then as the crew we can look at those numbers and we can accept them and return. And again, for the second one, we can go in and we can see the numbers, we can accept them and return. And once we have done that, the load sheet message has disappeared from the ECAM screen. Okay, so then we can go back to the flight plan page at that point, and we're straight back over there. Okay, so we now prepare to push back and start the aeroplane. So we go back overhead, so Control 5 takes us overhead. We go and put the seatbelt sign to on, and then we go and we can switch off the external power now because we know the APU is running. If you want to check if the APU is running, on the buttons down here we can control the display here. So we can press APU and it will show it its status, and you can see 115 volts, 400 hertz available. If you want to get rid of that, you can just press it again and it will go back to default. So while none of these are lit, this screen will automatically show the most appropriate data based on what you're doing with the aeroplane. Okay, so we want to go back overhead, Control 5. We're going to go and turn off the external power now because we know the APU is running. Okay, so then we go back over to the tablet, and we're going to go back to the Fenix app and go to ground services, and we're going to disconnect the GPU from the aircraft and remove the chocks and cones from the aircraft. Okay, so if we have a look around outside, we haven't got a jet bridge, have we? Oh, why is this aircraft stuttering like that? It's mad, isn't it, sometimes? And the simulator gets it in its head that it's doing too much. Anyway, so we've removed external power. So still on the tablet, we can do the pushback now. So if we go to the Fenix app and we're in ground services, we can connect the tug. So, and then we can press start. And if we look outside, you'll see the tug is on the move. So while we're waiting for the tug, you might want to flip the handrest up. Make sure your parking brake is on, otherwise the tug will merrily start pushing you off across the tarmac. So we're just waiting for him to connect. And there he is, he's connected. It's horrible that judders, isn't it? So it's already started, so if we press the back button, nothing will happen because we haven't removed the parking brake. So I'm going to do it on my controls just to make that obvious. I just realised my engine start levers were in the wrong position, which is fine. So we'll undo the parking brake. I've made sure they're in the correct position. My very first thing I should have done again in the aeroplane was gone around the switches making sure they were in the correct positions, and I didn't do that. So it just shows you how important that sort of thing is. So while you're being pushed back, you can steer using this. So we could go left, for example, to push our aeroplane out into this nice big expanse over here. So you could be starting your engines while this is going on. I'm not going to, because I just want to walk you through it. I don't want to do too many things at once. So we're being pushed out, and again you can control that via the simple controls in the tablet. If we had a jetway connected, we could have done toggle jetway to remove it from the aeroplane, but it had already disconnected. It probably disconnected because we went instant on loading of passengers. It may well have done it then. So we'll stop the turning, press stop, and that's disconnected the tug immediately. So we'll go and put the parking brake back on. So I'm using my controls to do that. And we're going to go and start the engines. So we go overhead, control 5. We're going to go and put the beacon light to on, which warns anybody near the aeroplane that the engines are about to be fired up. So we go and turn all of the fuel pumps on. So they're across the middle of the roof, or the overhead panel. And then we go and turn the APU bleed on. So this routes the compressed air being generated by the APU, the auxiliary power unit, to the main engines, ready to start them. And from this point on, we can just go and look down here. So if you watch these screens, so we're going to watch the N2 number on the right engine, and watch the ignition switch and the engine switch, because I'm going to use my controls. So I'm going to rotate the ignition switch to start. Notice the colours have changed down here. Now I'm going to advance the start switch for engine number 2. N2 has lit up over here with a grey box around it, which means it's starting the engine. So we can just sit and watch it, and you'll see as soon as it kicks in, fuel flow has come in, the exhaust gas temperature will go up, and the turbofan speed will climb. So that's ignition happening, and you can hear it in the background. As soon as the grey box disappears, we can start engine number 1. Okay, the grey box has disappeared. And we've got a control glitch going on there. I'm just going to go and wiggle my controls. This is a common problem at the moment with the simulator. We'll just ignore that and we'll start engine number 1. Did you see there the throttles raced to 100%? That was a glitch in the simulator. So we're now waiting for engine number 1 to start in exactly the same way. So when it comes up to about 25%, oh, it's actually at 20%, look, the fuel flow comes in, gets ignited, so the temperature goes up, and then the turbofan starts spinning. So I think this is essentially the turbine axle speed is being measured on N2, and that's the turbofan axle speed. Okay, so about 60% it should switch off the grey box. There it goes. So what's next for us to do? So we go back overhead. We don't need the APU anymore. Those clunks you heard towards the end of the engines firing up were the relays transferring power to the engines now. So the aeroplane is being powered by the gas turbines. So the APU can come off. So APU bleed is not needed anymore. And the APU itself is not needed anymore, so we can switch it off. And we're getting ready to taxi now. So we press Control and 6. This is one way of getting this. I'll show you it from the... If I press F for the cockpit view, gives you some context. Over on the bottom right corner is the transponder and TCAS. So we'll go and turn it to auto, and we'll turn the mode to TARA, which means then that the TCAS is working. Then we need to go and switch on predictive wind shear to auto down here. And you'll see now you can just go and check the messages on the ECAM screen to see if there's anything left to do. There isn't anything, but lights don't appear on here, so we do need to go and put the taxi lights on. So we'll put the nose light to taxi, and we are ready to taxi. So the other thing we'll do just before we taxi, just to break this up a bit, is put the flaps to takeoff position. So when we did the performance data in the app on the tablet, it said flaps 2. I don't know if you noticed that. I'll just show you where that was. If you come back in to the tablet and go to the departure performance, it was here, look. That means flaps 2 with a down trim of 0.2 on the elevators, which is done for us. Okay, so come off the parking brake, press F12 a few times to reset my head tracking so we can look around, and let's go and see where we're supposed to be taxiing to, shall we? So we are at Orlando. We need to get to 17 right, so let's pull up the map of the airport. So we are over here. 17 right is across here, so we need to turn right and then right again across the bridges and then find our way out to it. Okay, so let's just have another look at that. So there should be a taxiway right here, right and then right again, but on the right again we're going for the second right. Okay, so we'll ease the engines forwards. We've got the taxi lights on, and we are moving. Once you are moving in the Airbus, you can pull the throttles back to idle and it will roll because it has a small amount of positive thrust at idle, just enough to keep it rolling typically. So we can go and busy ourselves with setting the range on the navigation display. So you might want it quite short range during the standard instrument departure. So there's some bridges involved apparently on the way to our runway. Got a little bit of a taxi to do. Let's go and have a look at that map. So we're going over J1 then, and then a bit of a turn. This is junction 1, and then J2 is in front of us. So let's get on the yellow line. Stop wandering around all over the place. So we've got a couple of other things to do on the way to the runway. We haven't armed the ground spoilers yet, so we'll go and do that. I'll show you how to do it. So let's just get this going in a straight line. Okay, so if you pull up on the spoilers, it arms the ground spoilers, so it's essentially pressurizing the system. So in case you need to do a rejected takeoff, they'll come out remarkably quickly. Okay, so we're just taxiing out towards the runway then. When we get to the runway, we will go and set the landing lights appropriately, and the nose light will change. This bridge is actually quite steep, isn't it? To go over to the other runway. I've never been here before. It's quite cool, isn't it? Should we have a look from outside? So we're climbing over this bridge. Obviously the road goes underneath, and there's our runway over there. Oh, it's a bit bumpy. Yeah, look, there's the roads going underneath. Oh, they're supposed to be going underneath. It's not quite as accurate as it should be. Still good fun though. Better come off the power, hadn't I, going down this hill? We'll go tobogganing down the hill and smash the aeroplane up. So let's concentrate on where we're going. So we stay on this side. Let's go on the wheel brakes a little bit. And let's have a look at that map. So we just follow around the corner, and then first or second left will do to take us onto the apron of the runway. If you have got Navigraph, there's some really nice mapping features in the tablet. So if you go and click on the Navigraph option, it pulls up a map. So it shows you the Navigraph map with you on it, which is quite nice. Obviously you have access to charts in here as well. So there's our runway just over here. So if we go for the second entry point, then we'll come straight to the runway. We don't need that much runway with the A321. Although we are quite heavy today. We had lots of people and lots of payload on board. And it is the A321, which is the stretch version of the A320. So it is bigger, longer, heavier. So you do need to be mindful about rotating as well on takeoff about that. So you need to be quite... I think the book numbers say no more than 3 degrees per second on most of these big aeroplanes to be, you know, to be absolutely sure. But just be careful. It's a lovely long runway here, isn't it? Okay, so this gives us a chance then to put the parking brake on for a moment and just have a look at that route. So it's almost an immediate right turn out to an inset point and then off to the first waypoint, and then we're off into the rest of the route. So we're just going to check then. ECAM messages have all gone apart from the parking brake. The flaps are in the correct position. The everything looks okay on the screen there. So the takeoff config test, you basically blip the engines and see if an alarm happens. It really is that simple. The signs are on. Auto brake is on max. Or you could do that if you wanted to. You don't have to. Signs will be things like the no smoking, stuff like that. So anyway, so we're going to go and put the landing lights on. Oops, if I can even click on them. I'm going to do this without head tracking. This is one of the big problems with head tracking with fiddly switches. So then we put the nose light to take off, and we're essentially ready to go now. So what you might want to do as well is press the chronometer button at this point, and it will start ticking. And then we can go and turn off the parking brake, ease the throttles forwards. And the aeroplane will start revving up to go. Here it goes. So we keep the centre line. We're looking for the V-speeds on the indicated airspeed ribbon. And then as soon as we're about 300 or 400 feet above the ground, we should be able to engage autopilot. Auto throttle is switched on automatically, look, as soon as we went full throttle. So the rotate speed's about 160 by the look of it. Like I said, big heavy aeroplane with little wings. So rotate. And gear up. As we come through now, you can refer to the speeds, but we're going to go autopilot on and start raising the flaps. I'm a bit early there with the flaps. But obviously you can refer to the speeds here for the flaps. So 215 knots is the limit for flaps 2, so we could have stayed on for a while. But you can see the aeroplane, as it comes out of this corner, is holding a climb profile that is now starting to accelerate, look. So you do need to be mindful, that's all I'm really aiming at there. So we can pull the throttles back now to the climb detent, and the aeroplane will take over. So while the throttles were pushed all the way forwards, we were on max power basically, or toga, take off, go around. As soon as you're in the climb and en route, you pull the throttles back to the middle position, and that means therefore that the speed will be regulated according to the numbers in the flight plan. Yeah, so it will be targeting these numbers. So we're going to raise the flaps again as we accelerate, and we're off on our way. So the airplane will now climb according to the profile, and it's just on us to manage the barometric pressure when we get to 18,000 feet for the US. So we will pull this knob to go to 1013 hectopascals or 2992 inches, which is the standard barometric pressure above the transition altitude. But that's basically it. We can go and disarm the ground spoilers now. Oh, we can switch the ignition off. I should have done that. I missed that while I was talking. So I've just turned the ignition back off. Landing lights stay on until we get to 10,000 feet, so I'll hang around for a little while. So you can see the chronometer is counting up there. So that will count the time of your flight, which is always useful. And you just keep an eye on things really from now on. So the job of the crew after getting the airplane ready is to just monitor the airplane with the Airbus and make sure it's doing what you wanted it to do. So let's just have a look at some of the data here, because this is quite interesting, I find, as well. So you've got all this data. You can notice you can go sideways on this screen, so you get different data. So you've got the burn down on the fuel, you've got the wind data. So it's worth pointing out the aircraft doesn't just take the wind data that's programmed when you take off. The sensors on board the aeroplane are revising the predictions all the time. Yeah, so that's why the wind might change and you might get a fuel warning, for example. So it's just to be aware of that, really. So notice we are holding 250 knots until we get to 10,000 feet. And you can see that reflected here, look. 250 knots, 10,000 feet, and that's a limit, that's not a waypoint. That's saying until we get to 10,000 feet on the way to Red Sox, we have to maintain 250 knots. So if we were to zoom out now to show more of our route, because it makes sense to do so, we can see we're 20 miles out from Red Sox and we are going to get to 10,000. This will be quite interesting to watch it do this. So you'll see the target airspeed move as we come through 10,000 feet, and the QNH will indicate that we need to change it to standard. So we just wait to get there to see that happen. And you can configure that. So if you go and look in the MCDU, yeah, I'm not going to go there today, but in the settings of the MCDU, you can say what your transition altitude is. The trouble is with if I get sidetracked onto doing something too close to getting to 10,000 feet, then we'll be late doing one thing and late doing another, and then we jump down another rabbit hole and we're looking at something else. I find all of this stuff fascinating. That's my problem, is that I will get distracted easily. So 10,000 feet. So notice, is this going to start flashing at us? It should. Oh no, it's 18,000 for that, isn't it? So the landing lights can come off. But you will notice the nose dipped there as we came through 10,000 feet. That's because the speed marker has now shot out to about 310 knots. And it's favouring getting to that speed instead of climbing. So it dropped the nose to make that happen. So if you watch this carefully, when we get to the target airspeed, the nose will come up all on its own. You'll notice as well, we're only running at 91%. On the N1, 99% on N2 actually, so it is pretty well going for it, but the cost index that we entered early on will have influenced how much power can be used during the climb, so how aggressively you can climb or accelerate the aircraft. Okay, so look, now we've hit the target airspeed, the vertical speed, so it's lifting the nose again, so for the same amount of thrust it's lifting the nose to slow the acceleration. It's clever, isn't it? So to accelerate, it just dropped the nose on the same amount of power, and then to stop the acceleration, it just lifted the nose again. So the last thing that remains for us to do is when we get to 18,000 feet to go and pull for standard barometric pressure. Let's go and have a look outside. And there we have our Fenix A321, or A321, however you want to name it. And the engines are working overtime to climb us into the sky. So here's a question, can we use the radar? Not sure if we can. So we've gone for system 1, auto. Maybe I thought we might be able to pick up the weather. I'm not sure if it's implemented, but there we go. Anyway, 14,000 feet, 4,000 to go until we switch to standard barometric pressure, and then I'll call it a day with the video because there's not really much else to see now. Once you're in cruise, it's quite a peaceful trip, unless you've got failures or air traffic control goes and reroutes you or something like that. But obviously we're not using ATC, so nothing really to report on. So again, all the way through the climb, the aeroplane has been obeying the numbers in here. So you can see it went for 302 knots by the time we got to Red Sox. Then we're on the way to Jeffreys now at the same speed. And then once we go through about 26,000 feet, I think it is, notice it switches over to Mach number instead of indicated airspeed. The reason for that is obviously the higher altitude you get, the thinner the air gets. So indicated airspeed becomes an increasingly irrelevant measure of speed or velocity, whereas Mach number is far more consistent at high altitudes. And you can press a button up here to switch between showing speed or Mach if you are using a targeted airspeed. Obviously your speed is shown here both as knots and Mach number. So 17,000, 1,000 feet away from, what was our target to get to Jeffreys by then? 208, so 20,800 feet. That was what it's aiming to get by Jeffreys, which is still, what, 12 miles away? So we're probably going to do it. We might be a little bit low. So we're just coming up on 18,000, and the altitude will change when we come through 18,000 feet because we're going to change the calibration of the altimeter. So get ready. So we're going to pull standard. Notice QNH is flashing. That's a reminder to us to do it. So we pull it, and notice it just changed. So we've gone to 2992 inches or 1013 hectopascals now, which is the standard calibration of the altimeter above the transition altitude. Right. Hopefully you've enjoyed that today. We'll leave this aeroplane winging its way across the US. Whoa, those clouds look spectacular, don't they? Wouldn't want to be underneath those today. So yes, we'll leave the Fenix A321 winging its way over to San Francisco. Obviously it's going to take several hours to get there. But yes, hopefully you found that interesting. That when we had a glitch on the throttles earlier, that's what caused the warning, by the way. And we got a baro ref discrepancy. Ah, that's what would have caused the warning. This is something actually that's quite interesting as a final thing to look at. These are not synchronized. I think there's an option to set it so they are. So we need to do this on both sides, and then the warning goes away. Yeah. So it was complaining that we had only calibrated one side, not the other. So that really comes down to workflows between a pilot and a co-pilot, which is always a bit awkward in the simulator because it's just you flying it. Unless you've got some wacky dual control software add-on that lets you fly an aeroplane with somebody else. There is one available called Your Controls. But yeah. So it's just to be aware of that. In the stock configuration of the Fenix Airbus, some of the settings in the cockpit have to be done on both sides, and the barometric pressure is one of them. So that's the final thing I'm covering today. So it's good that we held on to see that happen. That also points towards something that a professional pilot told me as a bit of a tip. Never let the warning stay there with it on, because then you don't know what caused it to light up. So if everything was good and it suddenly comes on, it causes you to look. But if there was already something, you know, you're diagnosing process in your head is severely diminished if you don't know what caused the warning to come on. So what is the most prevalent or most obvious immediate thing that's just happened? So in that case, we saw it came on, and we looked across and saw very quickly that there was a message on the eCam screen. Anyway, I really am going to leave it there. I've been talking far too much, and this has gone on for far too long, and it's not really a beginner's guide. We've kind of covered all sorts of things along the way. But hopefully you found it interesting, and it will help cover any holes you had in your knowledge. And there's obviously tons more things to look into about programming and configuring the aeroplane, but that's that's the fun of it for me, is to go and jump down those rabbit holes and find out more and more about how these different aeroplanes work and how to operate them correctly. Anyway, I'm going to leave it there. Hopefully you've enjoyed that, and I'll see you again soon. Take care.